Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of The Insecure Musician.
Goodbye, my friend. Miss you. You don't look so good again. No.
Hi, I'm Maya Gomez. Welcome back to another episode of The Insecure Musician. I also just want to say thank you to everybody who's been watching these episodes. It has been so great seeing all the support from you guys. This is something that I really care about and something that I think can help people, myself included. So just thank you. And if you like what you see, please subscribe or like this video, share it with your friends, and maybe it can help them. I got the opportunity to interview one of my favorite people in music right now, Matt Zaddy. He is one of the most hardworking, just funny people around. He hosts open mics in Mississauga 2 times a week at 2 different bars. You can check out that information on his pages. Also has worked in so many different genres, one being a technical death metal project, and the other, his solo project that's actually more of like folk rock. He is always teaching, always working at his craft, just one of the busiest dudes I know. So here he is.
Sure, I want to see that before we get
Good.
into.
You can catch a sewing machine here. My wife's been making masks. You got a digital
Doing her
drum.
part.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she made them for our whole family. We got some guitars there. Here's my upright piano. Some guitars in the corner. I have my cat.
Studio cat, perfect.
Studio cat, exactly. A few guitars there. Nice little background thing. Some demonic Native American mask, which I love. Well, classical, 62 Fender Bassman. And yeah, that's my space.
Nice.
Yeah, man. How are you doing? You okay?
Yeah. No. I feel like I'm actually more stressed now than I was before with all the stuff I have to get done.
Yeah. You know, it's funny you say that. Like, I've found since people have been off a little bit more that I actually have more messages coming at me than I did when I was working, because I was getting my work messages before. And I'm still getting those. But now I find I'm getting a lot of either just personal messages or just messages in general where it's like I got to block out times in the day to clean them out.
Yeah, I feel like I spend more time on a computer or on my phone or whatever than I ever did. I mean, like, it's great. There's a lot of stuff going on, but like it's hard. All right, so let's talk about music and you. First things first, you are a very busy dude, always doing stuff. Do you sleep ever?
Yes, sometimes. I'm actually. It's funny you say that, because for a long time I was doing music full time and a job full time, like a lot of musicians do. And I had 3 years before I went full time, just doing full time music, where I was at a day job from between 9 and 10 until 4 or 5. I would teach for 3 or 4 hours, and then I would go gig. And I did that 5 nights a week, and sometimes 6 nights a week. And it was one of those things that for 2 or 3 years I was basically a zombie, because by the time I get home from a gig, because most of them were late nights, it would be 3, 4 in the morning. I'd do 4 to 5 hours sleep, wash, rinse, repeat kind of thing. Now, I don't even understand how I did that, because most of my days now, it's like, I try to keep a pretty solid routine, especially like, pre-COVID, when things were a little more normal. And now I'm getting regular sleep, because the latest anything that I'm running is 11.
Do you find that there's a lot of musicians that run themselves into the ground, just always kind of going? And I don't know necessarily if you get the time to actually do some self-reflection, or if music for you is that self-reflection too.
It's a mixed bag. I know for a long time I felt like felt like I was just trying to keep up. When I first started taking time away from that day job that I had, I didn't even know what to do with myself, but it gave me some time to think. Now, even now, with my normal, between gig and teaching schedule, and trying to be creative, I find I have to force myself to take time to reflect, because it's just so easy to fall into that routine. And when you're in that, it can be really hard to plan ahead and to plan creative projects, which take more time and take more advance notice, like video shoots and tours and things like that. Like, I have a steady flow of gigs that I would do on the regular. When I'm booking tours, I got to think 3 to 6 months out. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I found that sometimes I would get lost in that grind. Even with music, it can be grindy, right? Like, I would teach normally what I was teaching when would be 30 to 40 students a week plus 3 to 6 gigs a week. So it's still pretty heavy. Plus trying to find time to create. Like I remember when I was recording my album, I would go in and work with my producer for 3, 4, 5 hours. Then I would go teach, and then I would go gig, and then that became part of my normal cycle. But while you're doing that, again, you need time to plan it and time to reassess and reflect to say, okay, what's working and what's not? What can I do here to make myself better as a player, as a writer, as a collaborator, as a performer, and then also career moves like planning social strategies and things like that. Like it's very easy to not plan. It's so easy to just kind of just boop, 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 and just kind of
Yeah.
on the fly. It's much harder to make progress when you do things on the fly.
Yeah. So for you, I know that you shifted a lot between different genres, extreme shifts too. Like,
It's funny,
like,
because I know a lot of guys that went from playing extreme heavy music to doing the folk rock thing, or guys that were in much heavier bands, even within the genre. Like, I mean, Dashboard Confessional was in a much harder band before he did that. You know what I mean?
yeah. And like, I actually just listened to Starring Janet Leigh. I watched the video, one of your music videos, and like, I literally turned it on, and it's just like it hits you like a brick wall. And then I went to, B, which and like Busy and stuff. I was just like, wow. That is like listening to those back to back is a huge shift. And I'm just curious what the shift was for you.
It was as natural as it could possibly be, actually. I spent pretty much from the time I was 18 until the time I was 30 playing tech death metal. In some form or another. Kind of started out like as a teenager playing in like hard rock bands, which kind of morphed into melodic hardcore, and I got into some bands like Cryptopsy and Origin and Dillinger Escape Plan, and it just turned into this very spazzy, grindy, deathy, atonal thing, which I love. Like I still love that stuff, like so, like in my core. And I did that, and I pushed that really, really hard for a really, really long period of time. I was on my 3rd and 4th member of everything in the band. I had a great group of guys when we finally decided to end it. We got signed to a sub-label of Metal Blade. We got on a handful of big tours. We went all over the US, all over Canada, and the album never really took off. Like it got good reviews, but it was one of those things that it never really took off. And the process to get to that point was so long because of the member recycling that I went through, and I poured all of my resources into this, that by the end of it I was burnt out like bad. Yeah. The straw that broke the camel's back was I had kicked out my drummer, and we started to, I was working with actually one of the best drummers in my genre. He had moved from Yonkers, so like just up just north of New York City to Buffalo, so that we could write together. And after 6 months of me driving to Buffalo 2 to 3 days a week to write with them, he decided he didn't want to tour anymore. So
isn't that the worst?
It was like when he told me, I said, I get it, but I am just furious at you. And I didn't talk to him for like another 6 months after that. And when I talked to the rest of my guys, like my band, we were not young guys. Like the youngest of us was around 30 at this point. And everybody basically said, we've got wives and kids and mortgages. They said, why don't we do like one last hurrah across Ontario and Quebec and just call it, man. And they said, there's no shame in that. And I said, you know what? I think that's the right way to go. So we did that, and it was great. It was a great last tour. But my original plan wasn't to put out what I'm putting out now. It was to put out a solo metal record, like something like Animals as Leaders or Intervals. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the kind of playing, like a lot of what I was writing was leaning a little bit more in the groovier direction than a spastic one. So it would be comparable to what those guys were doing. Like what I was hearing in my head was like Gojira meets Meshuggah meets Animals as Leaders meets like, a prog band like Return to Forever or something. While I was trying to figure out what I was doing, I had been inadvertently sort of thrown into hosting an open mic night at a bar in Streetsville that shut down. This bar called Marcello's. It was like a rock and roll bar. The owners of Collins, my friends, happen to be cousins with a friend of mine. I said, why don't you talk to them about doing it? And I did, and it took off. Like it was like when the first night I did, there had 96 people on a Tuesday. It was nuts.
Whoa.
Doesn't even make sense. And it's had its kind of ebbs and flows over the years.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people at an open mic.
Yeah. So, it's had its ebbs and flows over the years. It's gone up and down, but, it's been a really good thing for the community. And while I was doing that, I was trying to reassess what I wanted to do musically. And I had always played a lot of different genres of music. Like, I'm classically trained. I have some jazz training. I always loved, like, kind of like the interesting acoustic guys. Like, I was a huge Dave Matthews and John Mayer fan growing up. And I just started thinking about all that I had went through with this last band in the last 10 years. And what I was going to do with myself. And these songs just started pouring out of it. That first EP that I put out was the result of that. And when I started, it literally just at these open mics, hosting these open mics, some people saw me play. All of a sudden, I had guys asking me to join bands and gig with them on the regular. And I started getting offered more and more work. Like, honestly, I wasn't even looking for it. It just started getting given to me. And I said, okay, well, I really can't ignore the fact that this is starting to do well. And it took me from about mid 2011 until 2015 before I released an original record, just because I was trying to find out what the hell I was doing and if this was something I actually wanted to do. And then we took our time with the recording because I was under I had no pressure on me. I was just working on it in my spare time. From 2015 on, I've played my originals across Ontario, Manitoba, all over the East Coast. And it's, like I said, I was able to move into full time. Now, granted, I'm not full time just playing my own tunes. Like, I do a lot of private gigs and corporate, and I teach and I do session work. And sometimes I take the odd tech gig where it's the circumstances are right, but it's all music related, which is amazing. You probably don't know this, but the job that I had before I was doing just music I was a partner in like a paralegal firm, like fighting traffic tickets.
The dream job.
Yeah,
For some, maybe, but
of fighting people's, traffic tickets. And it was one of those things that I kind of fell into that as well. That was sort of like a family business. And when I was telling the rest of the family that was involved with it, I'm like, look, I'm getting out of this. We put in like an exit strategy in place. And I went down from 5 days a week to 4 days a week, 4 days a week to 3 days a week. And eventually I just got out of it completely. And I was, teaching, like right now I teach 4 days a week. And my gigs normally, like I said, under not isolation circumstances, are usually 3 to 5 a week, and it varies. Summertime, it's lots of outdoor things like festivals and lots of private parties. Wintertime, it's anywhere from private clubs to bars to concert halls to some winter festivals, the few that exist. And then I usually keep my touring outside of Ontario for when the weather's nicer. Just because, I don't want to drive through the Rockies in the snow, and I don't want to get stuck in the middle of Nova Scotia in a snowstorm.
You talked before about like burning out, and do you find that like when you burn out, the best way to come back to it is like just letting it kind of flow versus forcing?
In my case, yeah, like I had put myself almost through two nervous breakdowns with that band I was running around our CD release for the record that we put out on Ironclad, which was that sub-label of Metal Blade at the time. I had a circumstance where things just almost fell apart with our CD release show, and I had my reputation on the line. And then we were planning for some winter touring, and I had a bunch of bad things happen to me, like my transmission in my car went. I had some other like really unexpected expenses, and I'm like, now I don't even know. It's not even a question of whether or not I could do this tour. It's a question of if I can make rent next month. So I had to cancel the tour because if I had it gone, I would have been like in the poorhouse. So when that ended, the approach for me was to basically take a little bit of time and reevaluate. I didn't try to force myself into anything. Like I had band offers. Like I was actually pretty fortunate. Like within my genre, I had 2 or 3 or 4 offers from bands that were actually really good to go on tour with them as either like a session guitarist or bass player. A few times I got offered roadie gigs, which would have been fun, travel across North America or Europe. But what I decided to do was just say, okay, you know what? I need to breathe, because for the longest time, I've just been under mostly self-induced pressure. Like I tend to hold myself to a pretty high standard with what I do. And I was like, you know what? No, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it gung ho. Well, you can only do that for so long before you need to actually step back. And stepping back, taking some time, exploring a few different options, which I never, this is not at all what I saw myself doing. The folk rock thing, not at all.
Yeah.
I would be playing in a metal band, touring around either in my own band or as a hired gun. And that was as far as I saw it. I was going to be putting records out in that genre. And when I went in this direction, I cannot explain to you how pleased I was that it worked out. But also, I've been able to explore things about myself and learn things about myself, both personally and musically, which have made me a better person and have made me a better musician. Like I still do the
Yeah.
metal stuff, I just teach it as opposed to gigging it.
I've listened to it. I love Busy. I listen to it a lot, and I find it super introspective and just really a great, structurally great, and also storytelling wise and something to say. You got it. Like I was just like, this, I can't say enough good things about it. I know it just takes that time to look within yourself. I think to get stuff like that out that has that much to say. So I was super curious if that time was needed for you.
Yeah, like the first version of that song that I wrote was in 2011,
Oh, wow.
and I didn't put it out on my first release in 2015. I brought that into the studio with the producer I worked with on my last record, who is Ross Citrullo, and he loved the song. I said, because I basically brought in a whole bunch of tunes, and we just kind of picked the amount that I could afford to record, basically, and that was the first one.
Nobody like talks about this too. It's like you have to make decisions based on what you can afford sometimes too, and that's like a huge thing as well.
That record, my new record would have had more than 7 songs on it if I could have afforded to do so. But it's funny now, just the way that the industry has changed. Like I've had some chats with friends of mine that are managers, and they basically said, like, honestly, we're in a singles and EPs kind of world. It's like putting out a full-length record. It's, you know, if every song is going to be something that you want to push, there's no reason that you can't just release them incrementally. And from an internet marketing perspective, algorithmically, you know, if you like, and this was something that I didn't do, and I probably should have, where when I put out my single, I pitched my single to the, you know, the Spotify playlists or whatever. But if you release each song individually, you can pitch them again and again and again and again. Whereas with me, because I put out just the single and then the record, I could only pitch twice to their official playlist. Like, I mean, I still follow up now with ones that exist. Like I've got some, you know, some databases of playlists, and I'm like, here's my stuff and here's my stuff, you know. But yeah, it's a singles and EPs kind of world. But yeah, you're definitely restricted financially, especially when you're funding this yourself. Like nobody was banking for me. This was saved money and borrowed money.
Yeah. And music is a learning process. Like, I like the fact that you touched on the fact that you didn't know that, because like we all don't know things, and we learn by like releasing stuff, and it kind of like either, you know, doing well, not doing well, how we can better pitch it to things, how we can, we're all just kind of figuring it out. I think you learn by doing it.
Yeah, and there are some things that you can learn, you know, you can learn from other people's mistakes, you know, and you can learn, there are some things that you can learn in a classroom, and there are some things that you have to get out there in the world and do. It's like, I mean, performing is very much like that. Like performing is a learned experience, you know, being good at it and trying to develop that as a craft. This was something that was really funny for me, was when I was touring with Starring Janet Leigh, nobody would work with us. Nobody would book our tours. Nobody would, you know, we had no, when we went for a long time with no label, no booking manager, no you know, no manager, no booking agent, no business manager. I just learned everything that I had to learn because nobody would do it for me. Like I learned how to book tours across North America because I had no choice. It was that or we don't tour. I mean, I one of the things that I didn't develop as a skill as much as I wish I had it when I was younger, because now I'm starting to develop it more, was working as an engineer or working as a videographer. Because in a modern world of music, having somebody in your band that can record you and having somebody in your band that can shoot your videos saves a lot of time and a lot of money.
Yep.
Like
yep.
I was lucky in Starring Janet Leigh. Our first drummer was an amazing graphic designer, so all of our graphic design work was looked after. But he did digital post-production movie special effects. So the guy was brilliant. But we still had to hire somebody to do our videos. We still had to hire somebody to record our albums, and we still had to, you know, these kind of essential things. Like I know guys who are in bands that are audio engineers and videographers, and I look at them and I'm like, man, I needed that in my band.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I remember there were a couple of guys I knew that had booking agents in their bands, and they were just getting on these tours, and I was like, man, I did not have any of that. Like this is something that you can probably relate to. I've never ever had a big stroke of luck or a giant leap forward. I've always been like this. It's always been very small steps and very incrementally. I've never had anything go viral. I've never had anything that just blew up. and I've never had anything where it was just like dumb luck sort of fell in my lap where I went from here to here. It's always been very, very gradual for me. But I'll tell you, the advantage of that is I learned a lot along the way. I learned and it's sustainable because I've seen people go like this. Like I have friends of mine that, either, they had something happen that they weren't ready for. They go out on the road, they burned out, and they're like, I don't even want this life anymore. Whereas if I go out now on a tour, I've done this. I get it. I know how I have to be on a tour to have fun, but also be responsible. I know how to not make a fool of myself if I'm talking to someone in the media. A lot of this is learned steps. Like I said, I've made lots of mistakes along the way. I sometimes put my foot in my mouth, but I've been fortunate that I've never said anything that was so bad that I couldn't be like, wow, that was a terrible thing to say. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And also, like, it, sometimes you got to apologize for not knowing something, and taking that step and just like owning it. You just kind of got to own it and be like, hey man, I'm sorry, my bad, and move forward. That's all life is.
And that's going to happen to everybody along the way. Like I said, we all make mistakes along the way, and just own it. Just own it.
Yeah, you do a lot of open mics. You do 2 a week, right? Tuesdays and Thursdays generally. Sometimes they're shifted.
Yep.
In Mississauga, right?
That's right.
Do you find that you see people grow a lot in those?
I actually, in a city that doesn't have a lot of original venues, it ends up becoming the backbone of the grassroots music community. And I didn't know that at the time when I started doing it. It was just kind of a thing I did in my neighborhood. But I have seen tremendous growth. I've seen guys that started out just kind of jokingly jamming at my open mics turn into full-time touring bands. Like there are some great bands that started out at my open mics that have gone on to tour all over Canada, even individual solo performers who developed their stage chops there. And, I'm one of those people that I'm very much of the opinion that we all move ahead further when we work together. So, when people who are at my events, if they need advice on who to record with, or, live performance things, or just general music advice, I'm just like, I'm an open book. Like I'm not one of those guys who's gonna be like, oh, these are trade secrets. I'm like, no, you doing better at this means we all do better, and it brings up our whole scene. So what I say to all the people there is, you don't need to perform at these all the time. I welcome anybody who wants to, because we have a lot of fun. And it's one of those things that a lot of the time it's a non-confrontational environment where you can work on your chops, you can work on your songwriting, you can work on your performing, and then take that to your gigs. Yeah, and some people don't want feedback, and some people do. What I normally say to people, like if somebody does something really foolish, I'll say, look, I gotta say this. But if someone isn't looking for feedback, like I'm not sitting there like judge and jury. I'm there to help if somebody wants help. If somebody's doing their thing and they've got their own way of going about it, that's fine. But I find a lot of people, we network there. We share contacts, we share information, and we try to make it so we are all improving, myself included. I test out my material at these open mics and see what goes over well and what doesn't. That's how I picked the singles on my last record.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I've gone to you many times for advice and, contacts and whatever. You're probably one of the most open people I've met, and you're super fun. You have a great sense of humor, super talented. So, I highly recommend these open mics for anybody that's looking, to get out there and meet good people and grow. Once we can all be there. You're also doing them online now, which is incredible. I don't know how you're doing that.
One of those things where I said, sometimes it can feel, especially in the circumstances we're in right now, where it's like, what the hell can I do to actually try to help right now? And I mean, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical professional, and I'm not working frontline stuff. So the only thing that I can do is try to keep the community together. Right now, the best way that I found was Zoom. So, we get everybody to come in on a Zoom chat, and then I've got a pro account with Zoom, so I just broadcast it to Facebook Live. And it's one of those things that some people are having a really hard time over, and some people aren't. And for those that are, I know a whole bunch of people that, they said, even if they're performers or listeners where they're tuning in, and they said, this makes my week a little better. And you know what? For me, that's good enough. If I can do anything to make it so somebody right now at home that's having a hard time, like there's so many things that could be problem. Like some people have a hard time with the isolation. Some people are worried about money and jobs and family. And I was going to say, a lot of people are going to know somebody really hard hit by this by the time this is over. This is really giving people the ability to connect and to feel like they're not alone in this.
Music is one of those things that's super healing, no matter what genre you're in, I find. And also, when I've been at my worst, generally, is when I've written some of my favorite songs or done any of those things. And I think that right now we're going to have this huge, outcoming of art. And even when you're not, at your best skill wise or whatever, some of that expression can be some of the most helpful. Even when I think I'm not super good, I still, for whatever reason, pick up my guitar. And I'm curious, if you're the same way.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that I am very critical of my own playing, but I try to be constructive with it because it's one of those things that I know the potential I have as a player is far better than I am right now. But I also realize the fact that I wear many hats. I'm not 21 anymore, and I can't practice 5-6 hours a day. So I try to dedicate time to be better, and that could be better at songwriting, better at my instruments, or just better at communicating those ideas. And when I've been at my worst is when I've written some of my best music. Like adversity is friendly, man. It has made me reflect. And then like the first record that I put out was me thinking of the folk rock stuff, was me kind of looking back on what I had done over the last 10 years, the pitfalls, the accomplishments, and then with hope moving forward. And then the new record was very much about life lessons that I had learned trying to be the best version of myself that I can. And Busy, that song that you like, I love that song too. It's one of my favorite songs to play. That song for me was very much about having open and honest conversations, but you don't have to be hurtful. If you don't agree with somebody, that's fine, but you can leave the daggers at the door, man. Like you don't. I've been that guy sometimes that will say something and I'm just like, wow, that was a horrible thing to say, and it's uncalled for. I wanted, it was, and because like when you listen to the song, it's me having, it's back and forth, it's me having it with somebody else who's doing it, and then I realize we all do the same thing, and it's one of those things that we can recognize that in ourselves and grow from.
I think we've all had conversations with people where we're like, you go home and you feel like crap because you were like, oh man, like I didn't understand a point or whatever, and also like none of it really matters at the same time. Like I just wasn't being my best person.
Yeah. Sometimes we can be cruel, and I've been that guy where in a conversation where I'm like, that didn't really have anything to do with what we were disagreeing about. I just got frustrated and said something awful.
Mm-hmm. And so, I do it to myself, which is interesting. Like I just
not the only one.
Yeah, which I mean, this is why this exists, like I've gone back on some of the things that I've even written and been like, oh, that's really not what I was trying to say, because now I understand another aspect to it, and now I need to write another song about how I've learned from that song.
This is very familiar territory. Like I found one of those things that was like that for me, and I'll get a little sappy here for a moment. Was I'm 37 now. What I think of love now versus love 20 years ago was a very different thing. Pretty much all aspects of life. I mean, it's one of those things. When you grow, you learn. I was gonna say wisdom is through learning from mistakes and learning from experience. And some of the songs that I wrote when I was younger, I was sitting there debating about, because I wrote a couple of acoustic songs when I was younger. I was debating whether I was going to put that into my new material. And I listened to what I was saying in them, and I said, you know what? No, I've grown past this. This wouldn't be an honest reflection of the music that I'm making right now. This would be something that would be, it's not who I am anymore.
Sometimes you have to learn things and then unlearn them.
Yeah.
Technically, in your playing. Which is something that I touched on with Derek too. It's like Oh man, so many like techniques that I learned were just so wrong. Just so absolutely wrong. So now I have to go back.
I had to completely reshape the way I was picking in order to be able to take my playing to a well, especially for the metal stuff, for a tempo increase to get it to where it was. Because when I was playing, that was something that I had never considered in terms of exactly how I was picking, and I had to go and retrain myself in order to be able to put it to that next level.
Is there a time or a performance where you just like, frankly, shit the bed, for lack of a better term, and that you still remember and sits with you, that you've grown from?
I remember the first time because the first time was my first show with a full band ever. We were awful. We shit the bed is not even close to what we were. I was so mad at myself, and because I'd invited everyone I knew, and we played awful. But I learned from it. I said because at the end of it, when we talked to the guys the next day, I said, no, we are so much better than what we just did. We need to be better than this. And I've learned that again and again and again. I've had times with my current band where something happened live, and I pulled the guys aside later and I said, what the hell was that? I said, that was like an amateurish mistake. I said, we're better than that. I said, we can't be going out there, and this happens to everybody. It's one of those things. Like, I really work hard now to craft my live show really well, because this is something that a lot of people don't know is, those big shows that you see where all the fancy stuff is going on, people just think that that's all sporadic. No, this stuff is planned. The best shows,
like Taylor Swift. I'm not saying that Taylor Swift, but Taylor Swift, her freaking, when she goes like this with her hand, choreographed. Like
everything. Actually, it's funny you mentioned her, because there's a guy that teaches live stagecraft for the Red Tour, Tom Jackson. He talks a lot about this in terms of how do you do these things that move people live, and how do you craft your live show to be its own experience versus the album. And it is a big thing, man. Like, I didn't get that when I was younger. I was like, what's the big deal? Just go up and play. It's like, no, that's not how this works. When you go to see a show that's entertaining, this is stuff, sometimes it's sporadic, but most of the time it's something cool that happened within the framework of a plan. Exactly.
Something might happen in an audience that, that she jumps off of a little bit more in like the way that she speaks, but it was still planned that she was going to speak to the audience at this point. There's still stuff that happens that is, special and unique, but they're huge plans. I'm sure that you can attest to this, that like, at the smaller level it was understood.
People put so much time into planning their music that they forget to plan about their live show. And if you want to make a show that's going to have an impact, put the effort into the live show too, because it's very easy to just assume things about the live show the same way that you did when you were assuming things about music when you were younger. There's a craft to both. There's a reason why certain bands are just so entertaining. Sometimes it's, their movements on stage, like it's the same way that you've seen some singers, they can just command that crowd. That's not by accident. That's a skill.
Mm-hmm. I find that some of the most impactful people, like, no, they maybe didn't think so much about their performance that way. However, they have previous training from like being in musical theater, or they have previous training so they understand how their body is on stage, or like there's a certain amount of building of the craft that happens just through that.
Yeah. One of the people I know that does that the best is actually my wife, because she did music theater growing up. And when I see her on stage, man, she owns that stage, owns it. I actually learned how to be a better performer from her, especially because the previous music that I was making, the way that we captured the crowd was to be like frantic and crazy rockouts and owning it that way. But when you're doing more of an introspective performance, you have to own the crowd differently. Like, the way that I do it a lot of the time is conversational and storytelling, and really trying to capture people in that moment that I was feeling when I did it, which is very different than when I was younger, swinging my guitar through your face. You know what I mean? There's not like one right way to do it, but you got to find a way that works for who you are. And also, don't be afraid of trying new things, even if they're a little bit uncomfortable at first, because it's the same thing when you're trying to expand your playing. You have to be willing to try things that are difficult, or things that are foreign. And work at them to be the best that you can be, because that's ultimately that's what most of us want to be. Is, we want to write good music that moves people, and I want to put on a good show. I want someone to leave my show feeling like, oh man, that was amazing. Now it could be amazing because I made them cry, or it could be amazing because they felt this rush of energy.
Figure out what they are and do them. Like figure out what moved you, no matter what it is, and recreate or create your own version of that. For sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you are totally on the same page with this, man. You're creating this experience. And that's the thing. You got to create experiences with your music, because that's how, like, if I remember the music that I loved when I was growing up, it's how I felt at the time when I was listening to that music that I remember more than anything else. It's that emotional experience, that memory. Like, I listen to some of the bands that I remember I listened to when I was younger. I listened back, this wasn't the greatest song, but man, do I love this song so much because it moved me. Well, I guess now it would be 2013. Wow, it's a long time ago. But I grew up, I was a big alt rock kid, like most people my age. And I was obsessed with Alice in Chains. And I remember I was at this Alice in Chains show, and I broke down during Down in a Hole, like broke down. And a friend of mine looked at me, he's like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, shut up, man, it's Down in a Hole.
When I was 12, 14, I came across Dalla, and one of their songs, Horses, just for whatever reason, it just hit me. I was alone a lot, wasn't going out. And I recently saw them, and I brought my metal-loving friend, and I was just like in a church listening to them, and like we're both just sitting there, and she's like looking at me, I'm like crying, just ugly crying. And at the end I was like, guys, I know like this is your song, but like it just hit me. And it was embarrassing, but it was also like that made my day, and they recreated it beautifully. And I think that, one, everyone should check them out, but two, that goes to be said for somebody's skill, to be able to do that years later.
Barry Manilow, or I could get moved by Slayer. There's somebody's good at what they do. They'll bring something out in you like that. And like I said, I mean, for me, like, genres are irrelevant. Like, I mean, for what I play right now, that was actually a challenge at first, trying to figure out what the hell genre I was, because it, like, a lot of what I'm doing right now kind of floats. Like, some songs are more rhythm and blues, some songs are, I don't know, poppy, but like 15 years ago poppy, or 20 years ago poppy. Some songs are like folk songs. And it was kind of finding this middle ground where it was like, you know what? It can all sort of kind of sit as folk rock. Let's just call it that and see what happens.
Yeah. Like, I'm the same way. I go from like, Stradivarius and, Slipknot to Dalla and, Buffy St. Marie and, good old Tracy Chapman. But like, you may think this way, but I kind of know what I wanted, and I think I achieved it, or I didn't. And what do I need to do to get to there?
Totally. And I found, like I said, I've heard things across the board in terms of what I sound like. Like, I'll get like Dallas Green sometimes. Like, I'll get City and Color sometimes. And I'm like, sure, that's cool. He's awesome. So, if I do half as well as him, I'm fine,
Right. And that's how I feel about like some of the comparisons that I get. I'm like, yeah, it'd be great if I could, have two albums that went that far. Hey, cool.
It's like, cool. It's like, I know what I hear. If you hear that, that's great. I hope you like it. That's it.
Exactly, right? Like, that's it. That's all we're all trying to do, is like, have people appreciate the music that we're making, or that we're gonna make, or whatever.
Totally. Is it like, a lot of the time there's a lot of failure involved in the creative process, and in any kind of real endeavor, mistakes get made. And the thing is, people don't realize that it's not just, you don't just all of a sudden stop making mistakes and then you're successful. You just get better at learning from it. I was telling this to a friend of mine I did on an interview on his podcast, where I was doing, like, when I do festival applications in a year, because I'm still independent. I don't have a big booking agent who's putting me on all these things, which would be great when it happens, but until it doesn't, I'll do it myself, and until I don't have to. On a normal year, in the late fall, early winter, I'll do between 50 and 100 festival applications. And some of those take 5 minutes and some of them take 45 minutes. And if I get on 5 to 10 festivals, that is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, people, they don't, a lot of the time when people see you at a certain stage in your career, they're just like, oh, he's just so successful. And how'd you get there? He's like, oh, I failed a lot first. A lot. And the thing is, I still do. But you learn from it. And you learn how to deal with it better. Because people still tell me no all the time. But I make a living playing music. I get no's all the time. I make mistakes that I try to learn from. And I fail all the time. But I learn from it. A little better.
And you do it differently then, right? You take those and just do it differently.
100%. You learn from your mistakes. And don't be afraid to make new ones, because every time that you challenge yourself to do something that you're not good at, you're going to screw up. That's just how we learn. A lot of this stuff is trial and error. You can read about something. Doing it is very different. And that's life, man. That's life. Being a creator is failing and learning from it. Failing and learning from it. And not just creatives, especially if you want to turn this into something that you want to do for the rest of your life. The entrepreneurship of it is just so much failure. So much failure. And you learn from it. And you learn from it, grow, and you grow.
Is there anything else that you want to cover in the way of this topic that you've experienced?
I wanted to say thank you for having me.
No problem.
I guess the big thing for me that I could say, if I was going to say anything to anyone, is like we've been talking a lot about learning from your own journey through this is there is an amount of grit that you need to be able to do this, because this is not the easiest way to make a living. It's not the easiest way to pursue your life. It just isn't. Like there are much more, kind of straight and narrow, normal paths that you can do if you want to live a certain way. But I have found this, despite all the adversity that I've had, much more rewarding. But it made me a better person. It made me, I think, a wiser person. And I wouldn't change a damn thing. Not a damn thing.
Yes.
Cool, man.
Good. And keep doing it, because I need to keep going to your open mics, because they're helping me.
Oh, cool, man. Like I said, unless I was basically touring full time, I see no reason why I would stop them. They're fun to do. They're good for the community. And, it's nice to be able to bring like that local musical family together like that. It's a good thing. It's a good thing.
Well, thank you for being on this, and thank you for lending your voice to this. And I can't wait for it to be seen by others.
Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.